Do you know someone who walked away from a deal or refused to work with the other people because they couldn't control their emotions? Of course, you know many such people, right? Have you ever walked away like that? When you are unable to control your emotions and walk away without making a deal, you leave a lot of money on that table. Because emotions are like currencies. You could take them into account to create more value when dealing with other people. Emotions are foundation of human makeup. It gives valuable information during negotiation process. If you are not in touch with emotions around, you miss a lot of valuable information. The real question is, do you know how to manage emotions to your advantage? To get there, you got to understand the basic makeup of emotions. Emotions are energy in motion. They help to understand fundamental human needs, wants, pain, and interest. Human emotions are predominantly autonomic. They just happen. They are initiated, regulated, and relayed by limbic system in your brain. Neuroscientists have found emotions are connected to your past experiences and to your physiology as well. That means emotions are partly biological. You cannot control emotions. All what you could do is to learn how to manage your responses to those emotions. There are two levels of emotions, primary and secondary. There are 6 primary emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust. They are universally common across countries, cultures, and regions. Primary emotions are reflected on your face, including in your eyes. There are 42 facial muscles to express those. Those are micro expressions that are not easy to hide. Great negotiators are good in understanding those facial expressions on your face. When these 6 primary emotions are mixed with varying levels and intensity, you get over 600 different variants of emotions. These are called secondary emotions. Secondary emotions could be culturally modified. Secondary emotions are reflected on your posture, gestures, and tonality. It signals intensity of your emotions. When you're negotiating, often what you see are those secondary emotions. That is why you got to master the art of body language so that you could understand the emotions of your negotiating counterparts. Understanding body language is an important subject by itself that deserves a separate video like this. We cannot talk about emotions without talking about the feelings. Feelings are awareness of emotions. Emotions are short lived for a couple of seconds, perhaps for a few more minutes, whereas feelings are comparatively long lived. These are two distinct conditions. Often, we tend to loosely interchange these two words. Emotions are important because they get you ready for action. The challenge is, if your emotional sensitivity is too high, it will control you. It could trip you off. That is when people say and do exactly opposite of what they were supposed to say or do. When was the last time you had a moment like that? On the other hand, if your emotional sensitivity is too low, you are insensitive and you will miss a lot of information about what is happening around. If you see your negotiating counterpart is visibly upset or frustrated, that could be a secondary emotion. You got to dig deeper to understand the primary emotions behind this behavior. For example, secondary emotions such as frustration could be due to fear or anger. I want you to think about last time you had a tough negotiation. Have you ever felt it was always the other person's emotions that makes negotiations more difficult? They started it, didn't they? Friends, we love to blame bad emotions of the other for failure to make a deal. Aha! Often, it was your emotions that makes negotiations more difficult. Learning to manage your emotions first is the key to success. How do you do that? The techniques is called name and tame. What is naming and taming? Simple. You identify your negative emotions first and give it a name. Label it. This starts with self-awareness of identifying your visible and physical symptoms of your own emotions. When you identify your own emotion and give it a name, by that act itself will reduce its power. For example, self-realization of your own anger itself could reduce its intensity. You will not be able to reduce its power 100%, but you could tame it. This helps to delay your response by few seconds, giving you adequate time to gather your thoughts to come up with the right response. What if other person is emotionally charged or hyper emotional? That is where you got to be extra careful because emotions are highly contagious. It could trigger something called mirror neurons in your brain that could contaminate your mind with similar patterns of emotions. How do you manage such situations? Same technique, name and tame. How do you use it on others' emotions? First, gauge those visible emotions of your negotiating counterparts are whether primary or secondary. Is this behavior a smokescreen? What are the primary emotions behind this? How do you find out that? You got to ask specific type of questions to understand the emotional state of the other person. These questions are called naming questions. Those questions are directed to name the visible emotional cues of the other person. For example, it seems like you are frustrated. It sounds like you are angry. It feels like, it looks like. When you ask that question, be a good listener to their responses. Naming the emotions of your negotiating counterpart will help not only to reduce the intensity of it, but also to reveal the real interest behind it. Because often, underlying interest define the real problem. What if the other person is highly explosive and comes onto your shoulder with fire and the fury? How do you manage such negotiation bullies? Go to the balcony. What do I mean by going to balcony? This technique is first introduced by Professor William Ury, co-founder of Harvard Negotiation and Leadership Program. Going to balcony is a metaphor for higher level of self-awareness, self-control, and state of emotional calmness. When you're on the balcony, you are away from noise and disturbance. You get a higher perspective of what is happening below and thereby getting more time and space to come up with the right response. Getting into that level of emotional calmness, it is easy to say, but difficult to do. Yet, with little bit of practice, you get the hang of it. During my negotiation workshops, I get participants on pairs and give them information that push them to a different emotional states. Then ask them to play the game of negotiation, applying these techniques by giving them experiential learning. These workshops are fun-filled because you learn better at the moment of enjoyment. In summary, emotions are good indicators what was happening at the negotiation table. Basic knowledge of makeup of emotions such as primary, secondary, and how to read them on the body language is the key. Game begins with managing your emotions first. Techniques that we discussed, name and tame, going to balcony will help you to stay ahead of the game. Why do you ever leave any money on the table because of the bad emotions of the other, when in fact you could use them to your advantage to make better deal for you?